Hey, John, I'm driving, but I can volunteer, like give you approximate numbers if no one else has more exact numbers.
Yep, go ahead.
I believe we are at around 5 million in revenue at around 2.6 per mile for a year. And what else did you need? The total
How many
miles?
trucks? How many trucks do you have?
25.
25 trucks. All right, so he said 5 million. So if he is 25 trucks at 260 a mile and 5 million in revenue, he's probably running 80,000 miles a truck, right? Because that's 5.2. So let's go 78,000 miles a truck, more regional. There's 5 million. So if you're running 5 million in revenue with 260 in dollar per, $2.60 per mile, then you're running about 78,000 miles a truck over 25 trucks. That gives me my 5 million in revenue. If my rate is 2 per $100 made, then my annual premium is 101 and I'm paying $4,056 a truck. My mileage though, based on 78,000 at 25 trucks is 1.95 million miles for 25 trucks. That's 19.5. If my rate is 6, then I'm paying about $600 more per truck than if I was on a revenue reporter. What would this rate need to be? If I have a $2 rate per $100 made, this 6 would have to go down to about 5.75, even more than that, 5.25. There you go, 5.2. There you go. A $2 rate per 100 in revenue, so a 2 rate per 100 in revenue, and a 520 rate per 100 miles is the same cost per truck in Bard's scenario. You get it? So if your agent comes to you and says, I got a revenue quote and I got a mileage quote, your revenue quote is 2, your mileage quote is 6. Well, then plug it in, 6. Clearly, the rate per 100 miles is not as good as my revenue. Same thing, you have a $5 rate versus a 2. Well, then clearly the mileage is better based on your scenario. Now, Igor, question.
Yes.
How many trucks do you plan to add this year?
At least 5.
So that's going to put him up to 30, which means he doesn't have to worry about the minimums, because the minimums are if you shrink. If he's going to add 5 trucks, it's doubtful that his revenue will drop below 5 million. Why would you add 5 trucks to make less revenue? And it's doubtful that his annual miles will drop below 1.9. So him going to 30 trucks gives him a scenario where he gets more revenue, more mileage. The problem there is, I don't know why that's wiggling. Problem there is, if you grow too much, his quote, right? Let's just talk this through. His quote is 25 trucks at 2.6, 78,000 miles a truck, 5 million. These rates are determined based on these numbers at the beginning of the year. If this was 50, just based on how quotes work, this rate might be 4. This one might be $1.50, right? You get a better rate per 100, a better rate per 100 as you grow in size. Bigger companies get a better rate per 100 than small ones. So if we get a quote with 25 trucks, these rates are going to be 2 and 5. If he's going to grow to 30 trucks, maybe this would have been 1.9 and 4.75, because it would have been quoted on more mileage and more revenue because he grew. So you have to take that into consideration as well. And as you do that, you got to predict what you think your cost is. If they offered you $6,000 a truck, and let's just do 2 and 5, right? If they offered you $6,000 a truck on a composite, and he has 30 trucks at 260 per mile at 78,000 miles with these rates, you'd be a fool to take the composite.
Yeah.
His rate would have to be as high as 3 or say 7. Not even, yeah. At a 3 rate per 100 revenue with 30 trucks at that revenue amount, he'd be better off taking the composite than the revenue. But at $7, he'd still be better off with the mileage than the composite with his prediction, right? If this
Now,
was
quick
7
question.
Yep.
Quick question, John. All these revenue per mile, dollar per mile, number of trucks, those are all prediction for the next year, correct?
Correct. It's
Everything
not-
is based on.
Yes. They
Okay.
quote you based on last year's activity, but they're going to charge you based on what you do in the next 12 months, right?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Your quote is generally based on what you did last year,
Okay.
mileage, revenue, all that. But what you end up truly paying is going to be based on what you do the next year. So if you think the market is going down the tubes, you got to take that in consideration, because they maybe quoted you based on your revenue last year, and at the same mileage, you're going to have less revenue. Well, then a revenue quote's okay. But if you think the market's going to rebound and you're going to make more per mile next year than you did last year, and you don't want a revenue, you want a mileage. And
Yeah.
if you are so confused, you're like, then you want to think about a composite or a schedule. You understand?
Yes, I do.
And here's the thing, in a market like this, could you start with 25 trucks, which is where you said, right? 5 million in revenue. Could you start with 25 trucks and the market really goes bad and we decide to go down to 15 trucks, right? For the majority of the year, keep our best 15 drivers, support our best 15 freight lanes, shrink 10 trucks because we analyzed that there's no profit margin with those 10 given the market and the kind of loads we're getting for those 10. Why be 25 if you're working those 10 trucks for free, right? Why not be 15 and make the same amount of money with 10 less drivers to have a headache for? If that's where we think the market's going, well, then you have to worry about these minimums. You need to worry about the minimums. Now, are there revenue and mileage policies without a minimum? Yes. Nirvana's one, right? Great West sometimes. Carolina sometimes. You get it? But your agent has to negotiate no minimum. Or see this 0.9, right? It's 90%. That's standard. You could get your agent to negotiate an 80% minimum. See how then you can shrink a little bit more. Remember this was 162? Remember it was 162? Well, at an 80% minimum, now it's 121. So for you, at 5 million in revenue and 2 million miles, you're paying 121,000 no matter what, at an 80%. At a 90%, you're paying 136. So if you can negotiate down, right, your minimum, instead of 90, make it 80. And have your agent negotiate that for you, given the volatile market. Then
you're protecting yourself from the downturn and
correct.
shrinkage.
Now, if you are very conservative and you don't want a scheduled policy on a finance agreement because your cash sits there forever, well, then your composite auto is probably the least risky in a bad market. You get it?
Yes.
Because you're just paying per truck. And if you got guys that go overseas for 3 months, 4 months,
Composite is the best.
then you can remove that truck for that 4 months. Was that video helpful? Good. So what do you need to do now? The next step is just to click on that button on your screen. Sign up for a free online event, especially for you truckers. Why? Because at that free event, you'll be able to discover how to build a bulletproof trucking company in unexpected and completely legal ways. Click on the button and just sign up. We'll see you there.